According to my screen, we are streaming live. And technically we have 2 minutes to wait for Penny to arrive if she's able to. Okay, folks, I have that as 6 o'clock. If there's a check with the clerk, is there anyone else in the audience waiting to come in? Debbie? No?
No.
Thank you. Then at this time, I will call the meeting to order. Committee of the Whole virtual meeting for 6 o'clock on this July the 6th. We have an agenda before us. Okay, with several items. Is there anything to add to or amend in this agenda? Seeing none. Okay. I will actually ask to add one item with regard to the what is it? The request from the deputy with regard to the liaison for the project, the mill project.
Yes.
So if we can add that, I'm assuming that would then be item number 4.5. Okay. With that, can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Townend, second by Councillor Gordon. Okay. Any comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Okay. We move forward to staff reports, and we start with an introduction to infrastructure master planning. I believe Mr. Thompson or Ms. Merritt, I'm not sure who.
Your Worship, could I just get you to pause for 1 second? We're having a bit of an issue just getting it through to our channel. So if you can give me 2 minutes just to see if I can get it up onto our station, that would be great.
Absolutely. Pause for technical difficulties.
Okay, if you want to, it will be, we can upload the recording and I'll work on it while we go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as I say, item 4.1 is the staff report. Mr. Thompson's report, or is Ms. Merritt presenting?
Actually, Ms. Campbell and Mr. Thompson will both be presenting. They're tag teaming to that one, on that one.
Okay, and I understand there is a PowerPoint to show us as well.
Yes.
Somebody's got that for the upload?
I will share it just now, Your Worship.
Perfect, thank you. We
Can
got it.
everyone see that? Okay, great. So thank you for having us this evening to introduce you to our infrastructure master plan that we've commenced recently. So Dave and I have a bit of a PowerPoint presentation to go through for you, and we're happy to answer any questions as we go or at the end. There we go. Okay, so just a quick agenda of what we will go through, talking about what a municipal class environmental assessment is and how that relates to a master plan, what we've done to date, looking at our project scope and project hierarchy, and then the role of council and next steps and schedule. So a municipal class environmental assessment is done under the Environmental Assessment Act. It's a planning process for proposed projects to ensure the protection, conservation, and wise management of the environment. And under the Act, the environment is defined as natural, social, cultural, built, and economic factors. And there is a large focus on stakeholder feedback as part of the environmental assessment process. A Class EA is undertaken when there are predictable impacts for certain types of projects, and we call those that they're done under parent groups. And the municipal Class EA process is a parent group of environmental assessment projects where there is a set of acceptable steps for traditional projects. And the projects are sorted into schedules. So in a municipal class environmental assessment, there are 4 schedules that are possible. There's a Schedule A project, which is reserved for maintenance and emergency operations projects. An A+ project are low risk projects that are pre-approved but require specific public notification. Schedule B projects are generally expansions or minor improvements to existing infrastructure, and they require agency reviews, public consultations, a review of alternatives, and they are subject to public appeal. And Schedule C projects are for projects such as new facilities or major expansions, and Schedule C projects include a review of alternative design concepts for preferred solutions, an environmental study report, and consultation, and they are also subject to appeal. So this is from the Municipal Class EA manual, and generally for a Schedule A or Schedule A+ project, you're doing phase 1 in the beginning of phase 2. And then if you're going to move into a Schedule B project, you would complete the rest of phase 2, which is looking at alternative solutions to find your recommended solution based on a number of criteria. And then, as I said, it's open to public appeal, and then that is the outcome of that is determined by the ministry. And if the ministry agrees that an individual environmental assessment should be done instead of the class environmental assessment under the MCEA process, then there's more work to do. And then Schedule C process goes through phases 3 and 4 as well, and is subject to that same appeal opportunity. So for the master plan, a master plan is undertaken when there is a benefit to doing that for a group of related projects, because it's a more efficient way of doing things rather than doing individual environmental assessments for each project. This is especially useful when when you're talking about integrated systems and you're looking at being able to better define the need and justification for projects in a broader context in close geographical location or for regional projects. So that's what we're looking at doing for our master plan. The scope of our master plan, we're following the master planning requirements that are defined in the municipal class environmental assessment process. We're doing a 30-year growth outlook, a 30-year outlook for a project. And we're looking at core infrastructure. So what that means is that we're looking at transportation and infrastructure, including roads, active transportation networks, and trails. We're looking at our water system, including our treatment plants, storage facilities, booster stations, and our distribution network. We're looking at our sanitary systems in terms of our treatment plants, our pumping stations, and our collection system. And we're looking at stormwater in terms of our collection system and our treatment systems, such as stormwater management ponds and OGS units. So this is separate from our asset management plan, which is looking at strict renewal projects. So for the infrastructure master plan, we're looking at a variety of projects as are listed at the bottom of this page. So looking at growth related projects. So an example of that would be, where might we need a new sewage pumping station or a regional stormwater management facility? We're looking at remedial projects. So in terms of, so an example of that would be looking at our stormwater catchment areas. So similar to what we did recently on Davie Street in Bath, where we recognized that we had an opportunity to add some stormwater treatment at the bottom of Davie Street while we were doing the road works. So we'll be looking at those sorts of opportunities. We're looking at the regulatory framework. So an example of that is that we're aware that the MECP is changing the way that they're going to be doing our environmental compliance approvals for our sanitary and stormwater systems. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that and working any required changes to our 30-year outlook as a result of those regulatory changes, to make sure that we're working those into our plan. We're looking at changes to technology. So for example, how will the future of autonomous vehicles impact our transportation network? Or are there newer treatment systems available for our water plants or sanitary plants where it may allow us to get some extra capacity at the plants without doing a large amount of civil work? And then we're looking under the climate lens. So how will we address our projects based on climate change, both from a mitigation and adaptation standpoint? So from a mitigation standpoint, we're talking about the greenhouse gas reduction measures that I was here talking to you all about a few weeks ago. And from an adaptation standpoint, we're looking at things like stormwater design and how that might change based on a change in frequency and severity of our storms. So what we've done to date, we've developed a team to move this project forward. And we're planning to do the bulk of this work in-house, and we will plan on accessing some subject matter experts when we need to for some of the more in-depth reviews that we might need to do. We've developed our draft scoping document, which is why we're here tonight, because we want to inform you of that and ensure that you all agree with our way forward. We've had a pre-consultation meeting with the MECP to make sure that they feel that we're on the right track. And we've commenced the development of our master element review list. So basically our major steps forward that we need to take. And I'll turn it over to Dave now.
Thanks, Jenna, and good evening, council, and to the rest of staff who are present tonight. I'm going to go to my other computer here, and just before I start, I'm going to step back and look at the recommendations, because when I summarize tonight, I'm really going to come back to these things. So one of the questions I'm going to ask tonight at council is, are there other projects out there that are on council's mind that they haven't seen? They haven't seen them in the capital budgets, or been looking for it for one reason or other, or ask the questions, how come, I'm going to throw it out there, how come we don't have sanitary sewers in the Taylor Kidd Industrial Park? That type of question. And the reason I'm asking for it is those things don't just happen. As Jenna's talked about the planning process, they take planning approvals, they take dollars, and they take a will initiative to get them there. So tonight's discussion is really to spark council's, well, twofold. One is to let you know what we're doing, but twofold is to spark council, if there's anything outstanding that we can get clarification on, to bring those forward. And we'll come back to that at the end of this meeting and go from that. So looking at the slide, we put this together trying to show council how the infrastructure master plan works. And again, it's you've heard about the asset management plan that Sarah's been working on. It covers our existing assets and looks at their life cycle costs, or not life, well, they do look at life cycle costs, but look at its life cycle and when it needs replacement. Where the master plan looks at more on growth or external factor changes or things that are coming into place, like the climate action plan. We'll look at the official plan. Are there things in there that affect core infrastructure? I can think of one or two. There's not a lot, but there could be. We look at council strategic plan. What did council ask for? Are the hardware in place to make those things happen? And we're going to talk about the secondary plan, which is the next slide, Jenna, if you could go over it. I'm not sure how much council is up on this, but the planning department is moving forward with an RFP for an engineering consultant, planning consultant to look at the area west of County Road 6 and develop a secondary plan. So they'll be looking at a whole host of factors and trying to come up with the framework for a new community in that area. So the infrastructure master plan, Jenna's going to sit in on the process. We'll be looking at what's required for that and from an infrastructure point of view. And the main thing that comes to mind for me is, how do we handle the sanitary sewage on the southern slope of that property as it slopes down towards County Road 33. It's a long way back to Lakeview, and is that a pumping issue where we pump back over the hill and somehow get to the sewage plant? So that's a question that has to be answered for that property to be developed. I won't go too deep into the process because that's a project in itself. But just to give you an idea of the interactions between those two studies, it'll be fairly heavy over the next 12 months or so. Next slide, please, Jenna. We put this slide together because I think it's kind of easier to explain what we're doing by telling you what we're not doing. And this is one of the things where we need council's input, and I'll explain that in a bit more in a minute here. So the municipal class environmental assessment by legislation covers only water, sanitary, storm, and transportation. So what's not included are our recreation assets and building sites, which are covered by the Planning Act. Now, there is a little bit of cross-pollination there, but I won't go into that detail here tonight. So the Planning Act has its own processes that parallel a lot of what the MCEA does, municipal class assessment. But we do have a couple options, and I've listed what, through discussions with our operations staff, the other directors, what would be excluded from from the township's infrastructure master plan, what we're proposing to exclude, and that's rural roads and drainage, transit and waste management. We're bringing that to council's attention because you people may have other ideas, but the rationale to exclude those are as follows. The rural roads and drainage. I know the public works staff is trying to get a plan in place on their own, looking at rural roads that matches their surface treatment agendas and all of that thing. And we thought that townships probably better served by letting them go forward with their plan on their own. Well, might be helping with some things or other, but let that process go on its own outside of the MCEA. Council's also asked staff to look at a variety of transit options, and that work's underway. And the province has basically pulled the rug out of the whole recycling protocols that are in place today, and is introducing new programs as we speak, sort of thing. So for that rationale, we've thought it best to exclude those, and that lets us keep the schedules that the master plan is going to take, which is approximately a year and a bit maybe. Whereas these other projects will have different timelines. So we can discuss that a little later or now if there's questions, but those are certainly things that we want council aware of. So we're basically focusing on the urban area, where I'm going to say more of the urban infrastructure, water, sanitary, stormwater, and a couple transportation projects that are coming through.
Dave, I'll
Next
hold
slide.
you there, looking for
Okay.
questions from council, if this is a good time.
Sure.
And I can only currently see one other member of council because of the way the screen goes. Does anybody have questions about what is included, what's not included, et cetera, with this infrastructure master plan?
Nothing for me yet.
And there's Mike, he says nothing. And anybody else? And actually, if I could ask one question to kind of get started. This whole infrastructure master plan under the MCEA, if I got those acronyms correct, is it mandated that we do this, or is it a good idea for long-term planning that we do this?
If we were doing an individual project, Jenna mentioned the Schedule B and C projects, we have to go through these steps for each one of those projects.
So it's a cost savings and a time savings when we do the individuals, but it's not specifically mandated that we do the group one, if you call it that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we're trying to get some efficiencies and put the stuff together because a lot of them are interrelated.
Absolutely. Okay. And if there's no other questions, I'll let Dave go on. Go for it, Dave.
Mr. Chair?
Good.
Oh,
Mr. Chair,
I heard
sorry.
someone.
Yeah, I had my hand, but you probably couldn't see me. I may be on the other screen. It's Steve. Yes, I was going to ask the same thing. And the other part of it is I see transit and roads and infrastructure mentioned. So what exactly input does Public Works have in this management plan? I can't see Lori. I don't know if Lori's there or not.
And can I hold that, Steve, and maybe we can
Okay.
answer it over the next few slides.
Okay, just work it in. Okay, perfect.
And I'll change my script here a little bit to make sure that I hit those buttons.
Okay.
Okay. And one more
Okay.
kind of feedback on the included or not included question. This kind of relates back to the hub project. Where would administrative buildings and structure fit into this?
Yeah, so those are all covered by the Planning Act.
Okay.
So if you think of our site plan approval process, that's the mechanism.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all my questions, unless somebody else has one. Keep going, Dave.
I would just say most recreation things. So the little bit of crossover might be like if there's a multi-vehicle or multi-mode trail or something into a recreation site. That's something that would probably fit both scenarios, sort of thing, something like that.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Jen, we'll go to the next slide. So actually we have 3 or 4 slides that I'm just going to go quickly through. These are all attached to the agenda. And I'm not going to go through them in detail tonight, but I'm hoping that council will either have looked at them already or will take an opportunity over the next few days and just have a quick scan, more so to get the scope of what we're doing. And again, if there's something there that individual councillor has like to have seen, then by all means, ask the question and see if we've got it covered or not. Jenna, I might as well just go through. So this first slide was just environmental assessment. It's more like administrative tasks. And then we broke down the next group as for water, wastewater, sanitary, and transportation tasks. So Steve had asked about input from the various departments, Public Works included. Jenna and I started this list of tasks on our own and got, I'm going to say, about 2/3 of them together. And then at that point, we sat down with the various operational leads, Alex being one and Sheila being another, just to make sure that there were things that if we were missing them, we would pick them up, and to ask specifically about what about transit, what about rural roads? Do you want us to look at that in this process, or do you want to handle that on your own? And so we've had a fair amount of time to date on, like, as much, put it this way, under the circumstances, we've had a fair amount of input and all considerations for what time's been available, sort of thing, to get that input. And going forward, once we've reviewed the various, we're calling them elements or tasks on the list, we would be pairing what we'd call a technical memo, which would go back out as a draft to the various departments and say, if we've got this right, or, if you see anything wrong, let us know, because that's going to build the structure for the final report, sort of thing. So in terms of the various operational things being involved, a lot going forward, probably after the next group of meetings that we have with the various departments in detail, then we'll disappear and do all our technical work and come back with a draft report in a few months from now. And then Public Works or utilities will have to look at our stuff and make sure we're on track. Okay, Jen, I'm just going to look at my notes here. Oh, I wanted to talk about a little bit of detail here of what these tasks mean. So I'm just going to look at two of them. Under sewage, there's review of Island Park pumping station. So that's the little pumping station that's beside the Fairfield water plant. So the plant that's the little pumping station that's there today replaced one that was built very early in the days of Amersfoort. The new one was built about 1999, and I was involved in the environmental assessment for that one. And when we did it, we essentially looked at the existing service area that the old plant had serviced in East Amersfoort, and we added the Coronation Corridor, kind of expecting at some point those lots on Coronation would do two things. They might want to intensify, or they're getting old, and at some point those lots will not be able to have new septic beds. They'll run out of space to do that development. So we wanted to be prepared in case that day happens. So we've gone ahead, we built East Amersfoort out now, Parkside's gone in, and Bar subdivision. All those vacant areas are now full. So one of the things we wanted to do was go back and just check those original design assumptions and the current flows and see, do we still have that room for Coronation, or is there any more room? How much room is there for intensification? If somebody wants to buy one of those big old lots on Highway 33, can they put a condo in there, for instance? We don't know that today, but by the end of the study, we hope to have an idea on that. If I go to the Fairfield water plant as another example, it's on the water list. that plant was essentially designed, went through an EA process, and we put in filters that we thought would last for 20 years, or sorry, the capacity would suit us for 20 years based on what we're seeing at the time was 2% growth. We're now about 24 years and the max day flows are still the same. There's been all sorts of factors that have come in and out, and demand initially went up fast, and then it's gone the other direction for a while. So it's kind of interesting. But with the growth study that we have in front of us, the council reviewed a year ago, it is showing for growth, and we expect that at some point we'll have some capacity issues there. So I know when most people, including council, drive by that water plant, they look and they see a water plant. And sometimes I do that too. But most of the time I'm thinking about the things inside the water plant. And I did a little mental thing tonight, but there's about 10 subsystems in that plant. The intake piping, low lift pumping, filtering, high lift pumping, chemical treatment, oh, you name it, they're all there, sort of thing. So every one of those has a different properties in terms of its capacity. So when we're looking at expansion of that, we're not just looking at one box. We've got to look at each one of those individually and understand how they work and what their role is, sort of thing. So a lot of it's not technically challenging if you've got the background familiarity, as many of our staff do, but it's just something that you don't normally get time to do that in the normal things that are in front of people. So Loyalist is at a bit of a thing that we have some expertise right now and familiarity, that we can do that in-house for once. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to tackle most of that. We are predicting that the water plant will need some expansion within the 30-year capacity, and that we just need to document what that is. So there's two examples of what we're doing. Transportation, it's actually kind of light because of the county road involvement within Loyalist Township, and most of the roads that are going to see growth are county roads. But we've picked out the Spears and Amherst Drive intersection as one project, and also the Windermere and Bath Road intersection. Both of those we've sort of looked at as possible roundabouts, but as part of this study, we plan on taking those two intersections through the processes to leading towards approval, sort of thing. Okay, Jenna, next slide. So the project, the managing director is Ms. Merritt, and the project is being co-managed by Jenna and myself. Bless you. We are looking at, for the first time in sort of this type of work, is involving Trevor and his skill set in terms of communications. We'll be setting up a web link, or a link to our webpage on the project, and also setting up an email address for the project so we can have direct communications with the public. The list below looks at what we're calling our technical committee. So certain people familiar with infrastructure or with planning in certain cases will be directly involved in the project in certain aspects. And some individuals like Corey Grant and Rami and Richard Cox will be using their technical skills to assist Jenna and I through all the technical documents that we have to put the stuff together, and then also Sarah on the asset management side. Once we get to a certain stage, we'll have to bring in the finance people and let them know what we have and how that all fits into long-term plans. Next slide, Jenna, please. So getting back to the summary, council doesn't have to formally approve the scope of the infrastructure master plan, but as staff, we didn't feel comfortable going out to the public and the development community without council being aware of the project and knowing what's coming on. And Not that we're going out imminently, we're probably, I'm gonna guess 3 to 4 months before we put anything out there on the plate, but we'll be starting to talk to people a little bit more and making sure we've covered the buttons. So we wanted to make sure council was aware of that. We also wanted to make sure that we covered anything that council had, you know, if there's a wish list out there that we're not aware of in terms of core infrastructure or that could affect core infrastructure, we'd really like to know that now so that we can, you know, over the next 12, 14 months, we can work with that. And I guess getting back to the industrial park, I don't know how, this is a public meeting, so I better watch. We've had industries come to the industrial park over time, and we always advertise the land as being unserviced, or we might, through a conversation, say we have water available, but we don't have sanitary sewer. And the industry people all nod their heads and say, yep, we understand. And then the next thing you know, we know that they've got their hand out looking for sanitary service, and how quick can we get it? Well, the short answer is we don't have it, and it's not easy to get. So what I'm trying to get to council tonight is to realize that, you know, these processes take 2-3 years at a time to get into place. And if we're going to attract those industries, we may want to think about having some of that stuff in place down the road. And I'm not saying tomorrow, but if council's planning for that, now is the time. Jenna said this is a 30-year study. This is a 30-year study. That's a long time. But if we're going to be able to treat industrial sewage or that sort of thing, the plants have to be designed to handle that. And our plants are small. They're not made to have big increases in volume without some major changes. So I'm not expecting an answer tonight or even at next council meeting of yes or no, we're going to do this or that, but I'd like council to think about that and maybe provide some guidance between now and at the next council meeting of what they'd like to see it there. And, you know, it'll likely involve staff report or reports coming back at a later date saying, you know, based on the discussions, this is what this might look like in terms of costs and servicing, that sort of thing. But to let it go and not address it through this process wouldn't be right, because you just can't add a quarter of the sewage plant volume to a plant that, you know, for those who've been on council for a long time, we've had to stick handle around these developments and we've been successful to date. But, you know, when somebody comes in and says they want half the water that the Fairfield water plant's producing today, and then realize that they have that much wastewater, well, that's not going to happen. So there's no sense wasting their time or our time on it. We either get ourselves in the place to do it, or we just say no, one or the other. So we'll come back. I'll look to council to come back on that, I guess. I'm done on that topic, but Jenna, next slide. So in terms of schedule, we've sort of slowly been getting ourselves geared up to go and clearing the slab. And we're now in a position that we're ready to start assigning some of the work to other members of staff to do some reviews. We'll be working with the secondary plan group over the course of summer into next year. We plan on early next year having an initial draft report that would go back out to the public, so our residents could see what was in the plan and our development community. And up until a few weeks ago, we were thinking that we'd have the final report ready in time for preparation of the 2022 capital budget. But talking to the folks that are doing the secondary plan, they think they're not going to finish next year, or it'll be very late in the year. And there's a couple elements, as I mentioned before, the sanitary sewage, some of the stormwater infrastructure, some of the road infrastructure that it's included, that we expect to come out of that study. it won't be a lot of data to include in the report, but we're going to have to juggle that information when it's available. So a rough idea of the schedule. And again, we hope to go public this fall with notifications of the process and kind of what we're doing. It's very similar to tonight's, but maybe a little more formal. Next slide, please, Jenna. So we're to the point of questions. How are we doing for time?
And technically, you got 7 minutes left.
Okay, we're doing good then.
Okay, we're at the point for questions, and I'll turn to council, but I will ask Jenna if you could minimize the shared screen, or is that Debbie, whomever's managing it right now, so that we can actually see each other. That's better. Thank you. So, council, we're looking for questions, comments on this plan at this point. And I'll start with Nathan.
Yeah, so this would be to Dave or Jenna, but it's a question about the environmental regulatory policies specifically coming out of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. So, not that I'm going to get you to comment on the political aspect, but you know, there's reasonable political concerns that the changes that are coming out of the ministry are meaning for less robust environmental protections. So in view of the fact that this is over 30 years, which will succeed this current government, and also because our stated goals in our strategic plan are to be an environmental leader, are there other means and industry standards and guidance to ensure the highest possible standards that may in fact go above and beyond the minimum requirements of government policy?
Jenna, do you want to take that?
Sure. So I guess one thing I would comment is the changes that they're looking at making are similar to the changes that have happened on the water side, where the approvals are now issued by the municipality rather than being issued by the province. And so if the township or if council has a desire to ensure that we are being as stringent as council wishes, then that direction could be given to staff, and we would of course adhere to whatever direction we're given. So the guidelines in terms of design requirements for sanitary, storm, and water are set out in various documents for each of those types of systems. And I'm not aware of those changing. What is changing is how the approvals are done. So we as township staff would still be checking to make sure that anything that's submitted or any of our own projects are still meeting all of those guidelines, instead of those checks being done by the ministry. So the larger, well, the part of the concern there is, you know, having the people to be able to do that work and make sure that we have the time, the staff time to thoroughly review everything in you know, an efficient way, to be able to provide those approvals when that gets transferred to the municipality. And then the other thing that they're looking at doing is looking at things from a system-wide perspective, where you would have one approval for all of your storm system, for example. So instead of having different requirements for different storm ponds in terms of the monitoring or whatever else that you would need to do, those would be a system-wide or a municipal wide requirements. So there is the chance that either things would be more stringent or less stringent than the current approvals, depending on how that's set. And that piece has not been made clear yet, but our understanding is that the proposal will be available on the EBR to comment on this fall was the last thing that I heard. And so we will be sure to do that. And if council wishes to provide any direction with respect to that, then we can include that in our comments as well that go back to the ministry.
I might just add, in that process that Jenna just described, the new requirements for stormwater facilities will be consistent with their current policies as opposed to some of their older ones. And our old initial certificates maybe had 1 or 2 lines on them, were essentially meaningless, where modern ones usually have a lot more detail. So I guess, Councillor Townend, on a technical level, we're not seeing what's coming out of the provincial popular press sort of thing. It's staying where we'd expect it to stay. And I would add, and I thought Jenna was going to cover this, but a lot of our grant funding applications are asking for increasingly levels of environmental screening, monitoring, what are our mitigation things. So very conscious on it. And that's both provincial and federally that we're seeing that. So that's one of the things that we are conscious of doing this project, that when we screen the projects, we can defend our positions on them. And I will add, I think this is something down the road, and I'm not sure how deep we'll get into it, but just that I haven't seen good convincing data one way or another yet, but a consideration might be down the road that instead of designing a stormwater pond for the 100-year storm, we design it for the 150-year storm. And obviously those have some cost implications, but when you lose 50 houses because something gives way, they have cost implications too. So these are things that are going down there. One thing I had in my notes and I didn't mention, but not everything coming out of this will be sort of a guiding thing towards construction. It may be a policy document. And, if that's a wish of council, maybe that's a directive that we take, and as part of the project, we kind of keep our ears open and have some sort of policy document. We use, we've had that. We've tried to use modern technology and be green. And I can't tell you something, but council will someday hear something about that. But it could be formalized. I guess what I'm saying is this process includes policies, and like we may not be able to go and say which areas need stormwater work in Bath or in the old parts of Odessa, but maybe the recommendation coming out of the study is that we need to study these areas because we have no data, something like that. And it could be an environmental policy, it could be anything. So again, that's something I would look to council for some guidance. If you don't see it in those little task lists and would like to see that a heavier pencil or a heavier time on it, then that's what we'd like to hear.
Thank you. Councillor Townend, anything further?
No, that's fine, Your Worship. I thank you for the answer. As I say, not being obviously on the technical side, my concern there is obviously the 30-year window, and governments think in 5-year or 4-year windows. And various governments have different priorities with respect to issues like the environment and climate change. And I don't think that's a partisan statement to make. It's just a fact. But my concern was where, how were we determining those standards for ourselves? And obviously we're having to do them in ways that are conforming to the standards that we're obliged to conform to in government regulation. But what's the flexibility basically in the scope and range of flexibility in having more robust policy decisions made about that? And you've answered that question, so that's great.
Thank you. Other members of council? I'll go to Councillor Buderick.
I just had one comment back to Dave's original idea with wastewater in the industrial area. I know it's first term and everything like that. And we're working with, in conjunction with somebody right now, the possibility of kind of going forward. And I know there's been things in the past and they've not gone off the ground. I would think being a 30-year plan, it's something possible we should put into this discussion, just because we've been chasing different people over many decades to try and jump on that piece of property. If we look at it and have a better understanding on costs and everything moving forward, what we might need from a provincial or federal standpoint, and who may be actually coming in to take that property, being prepared, I think would be a very good thing to be. That's all. More of a comment than everything for Dave, but I agree with you on what you were talking earlier about.
Thank you, Mike. I'll go to Carol or Ron. Do you have any comments at this point? Go ahead, Ron.
I know if you could refresh my memory from a few years ago with regards to crossing County Road 6 for Amherst. We have, I understand we have some land on the corner, kitty corner to Williams Auto. So that is our property, I think. And was it industrial or is it actually residential? And I mean, what's the capacity? Do we have room over there for a couple of hundred more houses or 300? Like, I mean, right now the property, right, which is ideal, is never going to be for sale for a long time, probably. So I'm just curious what we have there actually.
I'm not as familiar with the actual acreages, but the township essentially owns from a line that would be an extension of Amherst Drive northerly to Taylor Kidd. And there's 2 or 3 parties. One is our local farmer, has a good chunk of land there. But there's also a developer owns a good chunk of land too. So there's like between the township and the farming family and the developer, there's probably owns about 70% of the land there. And then the other bits are all smaller pieces owned by different individuals. Is my recollection. I haven't looked at it, Councillor Gordon, in a little while, but it's one of those things is where's the logical spot to put the infrastructure and put the township's dollars, and most, well, especially for the township owned land, everything's pretty well in place. It gets difficult as you get like the south side of the hill zone issues.
Oh, and I think the secondary plan work that's being done will look at what sort of densities and that sort of thing makes sense in there. Like, is the plan for a whole bunch of single family homes? Is there a desire for different types of different forms to be built in there? And that's the whole purpose of the secondary plan that's going to be done over the next year, is to look at, you know, where should there be lands that are zoned commercial in there, what should be residential, like that all of that will be determined as part of the secondary plan review.
If I could add to that comment, the total land available, County Road 6, Bath Road to Taylor Kidd, would be somewhere in the neighborhood, and I'm just totally eyeballing this, but somewhere in the neighborhood of a third, again, the current size of Amherstview. Right? So over the next 30 years, like this plan is projecting, the water and sewer requirements and the ownership of those lands most likely will end up changing. And so we need to this part of the goal of that secondary plan and this whole project is to be prepared for what will eventually be there, even not necessarily stuck to the current ownership's dictates about what happens with that land. No, and I actually have a similar question, if I could, to what was previously asked on the flexibility of the plan. 30 years is a very long time. Now, there are there can be huge opportunities that suddenly arise that we currently aren't aware of. As has been noted, there can be changes in environmental regulation, in technological innovation. There's already been a mention of what happens when EV cars and autonomous cars hit the mainstream. Maybe we don't need roads. Everybody's using a hovercraft. I don't know, and I'm not suggesting that. But one of my question is as this plan gets developed, is it more about knowing what questions we need to ask in order to do certain tasks? Or is it more about, this is what we think we're going to do over the next 5, and that's fairly tight, but over the 25 after that, it kind of gets looser and more guideline, less restrictive? I don't know. How would you characterize the 30 years of this plan?
I think a good question, Rick, again. First of all, the EA legislation itself basically says if your documents is more than 10 years old, you have to update it. So that's a review of all the assumptions you've made, look at changes in regulations, environment, whatever's happening, and do it. So there's an automatic key point in there to do that, especially for, like, I'm talking more at our level B and C projects. That's where it's going to hit. That being said, and I go back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, not everything's going to be a solid, like a project that we're going to build with concrete and that sort of thing. Something like autonomous vehicles, nobody really knows the answer on that yet, other than it's pretty clear to anybody to talk to, when it does come, it's going to hit like a bang. So reflecting on your comments, I think the finished document will have a handful of things there. So, you need to be aware of this, look for these factors, because when it comes, it's going to be there. And like a few of us saw a video this week about snowplows and the autonomous vehicles, where they say when they come out, they think that things that, like a transit route or a garbage truck pickup that have a definite route, or a snowplow, are going to be the things that are quickly put into service. So that means, how much longer do we keep buying $200,000 trucks with accommodated for drivers and all that thing? We need to be aware that someday this could look radically different than it does today, and it may come fast. And a similar thing is charging stations. How quickly will electric vehicles come? And does the township put any of those in to help with commercial applications at all, or do we let anybody just fight for their own little corner and put a plug in? So those are discussions that we hope to have along the way. Certainly.
Absolutely. Okay, Carol, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank staff for doing this. I think it's a great opportunity for council to have some concrete information available to them to do this future plan. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I do like the detailed task list, because it gives you some insight as to what some of the projects may be coming down the line. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none. The secondary question on this is, are there any other projects? Is there anything, I know this is reasonably new to all of us. If there's anything that anybody can think of right now, please pipe up. But I would also encourage you over the next few weeks to make sure you pass along those ideas to Ms. Campbell and Mr. Thompson to have included in those, or bring back to council for a final ratification. Just throw under the opportunity. Anybody have any ideas right now of what should be? No, it's early days. I expected that. Okay, any other questions with regards to this right now?
The key thing is we want to have kind of I won't say a firm list, but we want to go out with a strong list before we go public. And then obviously the reason to go public is to get some input, and there may be other changes after that, but we don't want to miss something obvious.
Exactly. Okay, if there's no other questions, we do have a recommendation before us, or two-part recommendation. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion? Nobody. They just want to keep talking to you, Dave. I'll take Nathan. So moved. And Carol, you're seconding. Thank you. All right. Any last opportunity for questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried for both recommendations. Thank you very much to Dave and Jenna. And I'm not sure if everybody's sticking around for the next parts or are taking off. Okay. Moving forward, we went a little overtime on that one, so we'll have to try to tighten it up a little bit for the next ones. Review of proclamation policy. We have a report from Ms. Chapman. Right. Deb, did you want to speak to it? Do you have anything to present to us?
Just briefly, Your Worship, on that, it was a request from, it was a discussion at the last council meeting in receiving a request to declare the month of October. We've, I guess, in prior years have declared another. So the question was, can we have more than one proclamation for a month or for a time period? So when we looked at this, we did look at our old policy, which was in 1989. The copy is attached on the report. And so the thought was in regards, and the report was on, I won't read through all of that, but basically we were looking at 3 options that were being presented. One was to rescind the current outdated proclamation policy and consider a new policy that the township doesn't issue proclamations nor support public awareness campaigns. The reason for that is A, we don't get that many requests. B, it's a matter of some municipalities are looking at it in matter of respecting all views. So you're not picking one side over another side, or again, offending anybody in regard to making the proclamations. The second would be to rescind the current policy and consider a new policy that encompasses proclamations, flag flying, and public awareness. Again, we don't get a lot of requests, if any, but the policy would be more detailed and again, for the public, it would be on the website. There'd be forms to fill out, and we would go forward with that of a policy coming forward. Option 3 was remain status quo, and that we really didn't want to give that as an option because, again, since the policy is back to 1989, we feel that it does need to be updated. There are 3 attachments to the report. One is loyalists. There's other 2 samples that on both sides of what we would be looking at in regards to a policy. So we're just looking for direction.
Thank you very much. Let's open this for discussion. First of all, we have proclamations, flags, and potentially others. Any comments, I'll say, to the report we have before us or concerns with it? And Nathan, go ahead.
I have a specific question for the clerk. In her research, what would in other municipalities, because it wasn't clear in the examples given either, I couldn't think of where to fit it, but of how other municipalities have dealt with proclamations related to Pride, either Pride Week or Pride Month, and what those, how those are considered as public awareness campaigns, or are they not considered because it's considered political? Obviously, the city of Kingston does it. So I wanted the clerk's opinion on where Pride in particular would fit in regards to an updated proclamation policy that we might implement.
Through your worship, or through the chair, it would, to me, it would come under that it would be permitted, that would be something that council would consider. Really, the proclamations that don't come before, or that we tended to get, was political parties and organizations, religious events, business or commercial promotions, anything that would be contrary to a corporate policy. defamation of the integrity of the township, or that there's no direct interest or relationship to the township. So those would be the ones that in a policy coming forward would be what we would be moving towards as well.
I would propose an example of a challenge for this particular type of proclamation. We all know, and I'm sure that all of us would universally support the fight against cancer. And that's certainly a good thing. And then they ask us to declare October, Lung Cancer Month. And then somebody asks us to declare another month Breast Cancer Month, and then it's pancreatic. And then they say, well, why didn't you do leukemia? Or, we don't want to make it competitive in this process. Obviously, all of us support everyone being healthy and the research to create that. But it becomes, I'll call it quasi-political about which charities, which organizations, which any of these things. And again, we don't wish to offend anyone, right? We don't wish to make one group seem supersedence over the other, any of that type of thing. So it becomes a bit of a minefield to walk through. We know the political sensitivities that are going on across North America and across the world right now with regard to racial tensions, with regard to a variety of political tensions, certainly. And in many cases, those are good humanitarian statements. Okay, but I would be very cautious about, having the township. Any individual can say anything they wish, but having the township take a stance, I would want it to be a vote. Personally, I would want it to be a vote of council to take that stance, whatever that stance may be. And as much as possible, I would encourage this township to stay out of controversial issues. That's my position. And I turn to the rest of council. Anybody? Go ahead, Mike.
Just echoing your comments and take things case by case. I agree with you.
So we could proclaim, I mean, again, there's a variety of options within the report that Debbie's provided. We could say, we don't do proclamations on request, we do proclamations on resolution. We just recently proclaimed Loyalist Days, and we chose to do that. We put that forward and did that, and we deemed that to be a good thing. And that's a proclamation like several others. But I vividly remember, 10, 12, 15 years ago, council proclaiming International, Day to support liquor store employees, International Day to support daycare workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not against any of those groups, but it became a very advocacy-driven process to put out those calls for proclamations, and that's the side of it that I would prefer to have things come up from within Loyalists and our own residents. And if our residents ask us to proclaim stuff, then we need to consider that. But when things are coming from externals, from big unions, from political parties, from whomever, I would tend I would prefer those to be internal. And Carol or Ron?
Good.
No? Okay. So we have a few options within, oh, sorry, Carol, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I kind of share your views on this. I think it has to come back to council as to what the proclamation should be for, and it should relate to the township as a whole, not just to certain organizations.
So that kind of puts us in a semi option 2, Debbie, I think, right? Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, to piggyback there, your worship, I mean, I wanted to move option 2, and the way I read option 2, I think that it can be worked in that part of the process is that any any request ultimately comes to council. But I still think it's worth having a bit more of a robust policy to give council some legs for saying no in some cases. So I think option 2 can work for encompassing everything that everybody's said.
And anybody else have further comments? Mike, go ahead. Oh, no, it was just a hand.
It was, I was just trying to adjust my volume, sorry.
Fair enough. Okay, Debbie, if I take a motion to adopt option 2 with the comments provided, that'll provide enough direction for you to come back with a more formalized policy?
Yes.
And then I'll look for somebody to officially make that motion. Councillor Townend, seconded by Councillor Parks. Okay. Any further comments or questions with regard to this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next up, and we saved a little bit of time there. Procedural bylaw review. Okay. We have a report from Debbie on a number of issues. Okay. I'm sure you've all had a chance to go through it. Debbie, did you want to present anything specific to it?
Mute. Basically, it's there. I can go through each of the items if you like, or if there's something that, again, the idea will be to bring forward an amendment. So there's some topics in there for discussion, but I think through the report, it's laid out basically with the recommendations on the changes.
Thank you. And just for a more casual procedure, because we are in committee of the whole, what I would like to do, if that's okay with the as of council, is kind of deal with the sections one at a time. They are very different issues in each one, even though they're all within the procedural bylaw. So let's start with the electronic media. We're looking to effectively change to meet the modern enhancements that we're moving towards with iCompass. Is anyone having any concerns with that? Any issues, any changes that they'd like to see? Everybody's hip hip hooray, we're going forward. I see little smiles. Come on, guys, it's supposed to be fairly casual in committee of the whole. Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections or changes to the proposal for section 4. Okay. That makes sense, Debbie?
Yeah. So just for the chair, then what we'll do is we'll incorporate a section in there that just basically outlines again the live streaming. What we'd probably propose is a procedure again, just or policy that it would outline again what would entail with the live streaming once we go back in chamber. So again, we'll carry on as we are doing now through Zoom. So we're under the our current procedure bylaw amendment that allows us to do that.
Absolutely. Okay. Next up, section 11, the agenda preparation. There's 2 bullets in this, one with regard to the national anthem we've discussed before, and one with regard to the quote unquote unfinished business list. Okay. Let's start with the national anthem item. Okay. I think it's been discussed before in committee of the whole that I think we've, by consensus at least, agreed that we would start playing the national anthem at the beginning of all formal council meetings. And any objection? Go ahead, Mike.
No objection. Just the question, will we be doing it in the virtual format as well?
And depends on where we are in virtual format and when we get the procedural bylaw actually changed, because at this point we'd be looking at likely the August meeting before we could have this ratified, wouldn't we, Debbie? Okay. And I don't know when we're going back to in-person meetings. I'm kind of hopeful that it's by September, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will have to bring it to a public, like once the draft is there, it'll be presented to council, public meeting, or at least public notice so that people have an opportunity to comment on the changes.
Absolutely. Carol, I saw your hand up as well. No, a thumb up. That's good. Okay. All right. Nathan or Ron?
Oh,
Okay, so we're good with the national anthem. I did make a specific request to staff when they're figuring out which version of the national anthem to be playing. My personal request was that it be instrumental, no lyrics. Again, this is me avoiding controversies on the changes that have happened over the past little while with regard to the lyrics in O Canada. And again, unless you've got comment on that, that'll likely be the way the staff moves forward. Okay. On the unfinished business list, there's a kind of a recommendation to change it to a council initiative listing of a sort, listing where we stand on the requests of council. Is that a fair description of that, Debbie? Yep, thank you. All right. Over the years, there's been a number of things that council kind of scratches their heads and goes, didn't we ask for this 6 months ago or something like that? And keeping track of all of those, keeping us up to date on where we are on all of those. Many times there's totally valid reasons why things didn't happen along the schedule that we had originally hoped they would. But sometimes it's hard to keep track of these things as well. So I think that's where this council initiative listing is coming from and would be going to. And we would, I'm sure that Debbie would provide us with a kind of a sample and idea as to what this would look like as before they actually went on to agendas. But is everyone in agreement that this is where we need to move as far as the agendas go? Yep, okay. And I'm seeing thumbs up on this one as well. Okay, section 20, open forum. Right. We haven't had open forums during the virtual meetings because it's awkward and very, very difficult. We want to have some kind of, we want to encourage public engagement in our council meetings. And this is at least one way of moving that forward. And there is a sample document or a sample, I guess, web page lower in this report. Any comments on this initiative? It does allow for that online engagement. It does require people putting in, contact information and things of that nature. I don't know if we can stop people from, I'll say, the open-ended commentary that can happen in social media, et cetera, that is sometimes not appropriate for formal meetings. But we'll have to wait and see and how these roll out. But it does provide yet another tool for people to speak to us. Go ahead, Councillor Budrick.
Just one question. So, I mean, when we're doing a virtual, are we going to give them the option to come on virtually while we do this, or is this going to be something that they put in ahead of time? And second part of that question is, when we actually do get back to council chambers, are we still going to have an online presence where someone can be there virtually with us instead of actually coming to the council chamber?
Debbie?
Yes, through the chair. The intent is right now to allow it for the online or virtual, but it can carry forward. It's just a tracking mechanism that once they put in a valid email, they will get a tracking number, and then we can provide updates via that versus some of the other online.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm off that. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, any other comments with regard to that one? Personally, I see it as a positive step forward for resident engagement. So, okay, on to section 25. Right? It's about how we vote. I'm sure that some of you have noted that sometimes during these virtual meetings, I am kind of looking around at the various windows, trying to figure out whose hand is up. And sometimes the hand is here, and sometimes the hand is over here, and it kind of disappears or doesn't disappear. It can be quite difficult. As we move forward, we will be doing things more in open video formats, even when we get back to in person. And this will provide us with a tool that's kind of already embedded in our iCompass tools to allow us to actually, each vote becomes a very clear statement. I don't have to second guess whose hand was up when. So how does council feel about that? And
Go ahead. No, go
I'll
ahead.
go to Mike first.
Oh, I'm all for it. Sorry, I'm all for it.
And then Nathan?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor. I just had a question about whether, because it refers to the screens that we will see, but will the public be able to see the voting as well? Well, kind of like it is at Kingston City Council meetings where they have the projector screen and the members of council and how they voted. Will the public be able to see?
Debbie?
Through the chair, I'll have to find that out. I know it shows basically in the, so what will happen is anybody who's watching it is going to see it because we are live streaming. So that will be on there if they actually want to go. The whole intent on this, I believe, is more that it will be into the minutes. So again, the recordings are there for people to reference. The minutes are the official records. So in the minutes, it will be able to identify the for and against and abstain votes in the actual written minutes. But I will find that out for sure.
Just for my clarity, in that format, it would show, yes, 4, no, 3, as an example, right? But or would it show, Mayor Brzee voted this way, Mayor Townend or Councillor Townend voted this way, Councillor Gordon voted that way.
Yes, I do have a little video that they did send me. That's a training video on the digital voting. I can try to play it. It's not very long. If that
Councillor,
would help you.
Do you want to see it?
Yes, please.
Yes, if you can share your screen and do that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Let's see. All right, make sure. Are you able to see that?
Council member training using digital voting.
Yep.
Thank you. If they're talking, we cannot hear it, Debbie.
Sorry, I'll send it out to council.
Okay, but let it play. It's only a few more seconds. Let it play out, if you would.
I can just explain the green is the arrow or the check mark says that you're able to vote.
So we'd have record of who moved.
Yep.
Who seconded?
Yeah, the second, as soon as the movers put in, it'll move to seconder.
Perfect. And then a 4 against or abstained?
Yep.
Thank you. And I guess the question from the floor was
Yeah, so here's where it shows.
1, 4,
So
0
on the
against.
left, it'll say who voted for, who voted against.
Yeah.
And then the final vote.
So, yeah.
And our minutes would show the count or the list?
I believe it shows the who's for and who's against.
The list. Okay, thank you. Effectively, there's no more need for a recorded vote.
It's very similar to a recorded vote, yes. Whoops.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Townend, that clarifies?
Yes, it does, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments on that section? No, we're still quasi supportive. Moving forward, the committee of the whole. Right. We have a few gray areas with it. We're working within it, but still developing it. Okay. So the first point is, do we do this basically every month. The first Monday, if there's a committee of adjustment, we have it after the committee of adjustment. If there's no committee of adjustment, we just have it at the regular time. But we plan to, unless there is a period where there's very little activity, we plan to have this meeting. We put it on the schedule for basically every month. Is that supported as a rule by council? Comments, Councillor Townend?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of doing that, of having the set date. And as you say, that your worship, if there's a particularly slow period, then we can decide to cancel it. But I think generally, I think it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Other members? And Councillor Buderick is nodding. Ron or Carol?
Yep.
And general nods. Okay, we'll move forward. Next one is
Sorry,
this.
through the
Sorry,
chair.
yes.
So just for clarification on that, what we'll do is it'll just be expanded within the procedure bylaw. Again, that outlines kind of those scenarios, just because right now it only speaks to it in the definitions. We really didn't expand on it within the document. So we'll just expand on that for that area.
Okay, thank you. Less formal setting of presentations to a. And the second bullet is just more of a description of what we should be doing in this committee of the whole. And I think personally, I think it's worked very well to have more casual conversations to discuss these elements. At this point, I'm assuming that the general support from council on that. And I'm seeing nods all the way around. So that's just a description. We don't need to do anything really with that. And the idea that it's treated as a committee, that any actions taken here, any directions taken here, et cetera, are then brought forward to actual council on a public agenda and possibly deliberated and discussed, but definitely voted upon and ratified at that point. I don't think we have much choice in that matter, actually, but to have it clarified in the procedural bylaw would be a very good thing. The last question in this section is that of chair. We've had some discussion about rotation. We've had some discussion about succession planning and things of that nature. We haven't really provided a firm direction. I was suggesting, call me and I'll pick somebody, which is not necessarily the best way to do this. The other option would be to pick someone on a kind of a period, whether it be a few months, 6 months, a year, whatever. Possibly that choose the deputy just because it's kind of second in charge of council. What are the thoughts from the floor as to who should chair this? I'll start with Ron. I
would
think
say
I saw a hand.
I would say the deputy.
And okay, Mike.
Agree with Ron there on the deputy, absolutely, or yourself. Yes.
And Carol.
I would agree with both of those.
And Nathan, let's have some discussion about this.
I'll choose my battles.
And I can ultimately say that one member that's present, another member that's not present, have openly suggested that they would be interested in chairing these meetings and gaining that experience, or for whatever I'll leave it to them to define why they want to be in the chair. But if we don't have the deputy here now to we can voluntold him in his absence, whether that's fair or not. Carol.
The way that it's worded actually in this document, it allows for anyone that is interested to step up and possibly do that. So I think that's good wording to leave in there.
I think the clerk was looking for more precise wording as to how this would operate. Go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, so what we can do in there is, because it follows the second meeting, by that time, like the second meeting of the month, we would know, the CAO would know how many reports or what, if there was topics to be put onto a committee of the whole, we could add an agenda item when we set the meeting dates, to then say where the chair or the mayor at the time could ask if anybody was interested, or that it's appointed to Jim ultimately, or the deputy mayor, sorry, and or if anybody else is interested, and then they could make it known there. That gives them a bit of time as well to get familiar with the meeting, the platform, that type of thing. Just a suggestion.
And I look for comments on that suggestion. I'll be honest, I have a tendency to prefer not necessarily a permanent definition as to who the chair is, but a period, a fixed time when we know who the chair will be, right? It kind of lays it out. You can plan it for it in advance, right? Okay, I'm going to put it back to more formal stance. Who wants to put forward a motion? Nobody? Somebody tell me the language to put in here. Debbie?
Through the chair, what we could do is, just from what I heard, I could draft the wording that it's the deputy mayor and or alternate, it should the deputy mayor not be able to attend or something like that. And then the discussion could happen.
Okay. To recognize what I think I'm hearing, actually, if I could suggest, since this does have to go into a draft bylaw, but we can, if you could draft the point in that bylaw twice, once supporting the appointment of an individual, right? The other one supporting a process by which we would identify the individuals for the meetings. Because I think that's, and then council in council chambers can make the final call on which way they want to go on that. Is that fair, folks? Once we have language in front of us, we can take a vote. Okay. Last item here, oh no, not quite the last item, I think. Right. Yeah, is the idea of department liaisons. We have spoken about this a number of times, about the idea of getting better connected to our department heads, to the functions, and the one of the examples that was given way back when, shortly after the election, the Gananoque Council was reported in the newspaper of appointing ministers. I don't think we need cabinet minister titles here, but of people that are more in depth and engaged in each of those areas from council, representing that, and then being able to speak back to council on those issues. And it is noted that we have 5 principal departments, and in the members of council that are not the deputy or myself, we have 5 members of council. I'm thinking that's quite an appropriate number. Okay. With that said, right, the idea would be that we would appoint a council member to a department head. And those liaison meetings would happen on a regular basis. We would figure out that term. Again, the suggestion here is not more than 2 concurrent years. I was thinking a year at a time, but again, it's up to council, up to figuring out what this would be. And that after those meetings through the month, at the second council meeting of the month, the liaison would actually speak to, we would have liaison reports on the agenda. And we would turn to, the liaison for that department and say, do you have anything to report from that department right now? Okay. quick update on what's going on within that department, initiatives towards new policy, big projects that are going on, etc. Right? And then when any one of us has a question about what's going on within that department, we can check with staff, but we can also get the political view from our council member who has a more in-depth understanding of that area. And so that's the framework of what we're looking at. And again, it's been discussed before. Let's put it on the floor here. See if we can get it finalized. Any comments? Councillor Townend.
I'm actually not in favor of moving forward with it at this time. I know that's a little bit of a shift in my perspective, but I think the framework for it now is too vague and too general under the circumstances in which we're in. And I'm speaking mainly with respect to the burden this places on staff. I don't think it's a terrible idea per se. I think that to work this out now at this particular time, I think would be a bit burdensome to staff, and it does need to be done, in my view, quite carefully, because the risk is there for blurring necessarily distinct lines between council and staff as far as council interfering in staff matters, and we'd want to make sure that those lines of distinction were really clear, and to go through the bother of doing that at this particular time, I'm not sure is entirely necessary, or what it would contribute to be worth that effort. That's just my thoughts on the present moment. I don't know what other colleagues feel.
Other members? Comments? Mike?
If there's going to be some clarification, I still like the idea of it going forward. But obviously, a solid outline would be good, though. Yeah, I'm still in favor of it going forward, but Nathan does bring up some good points there.
Okay. Ron or Carol? Carol, go ahead.
I too am a little bit on the fence with it. I agree with what Nathan is saying. I'm just not sure what the outcome would be, and I would be concerned about it being burdensome on staff to do this. So,
okay. Ron, comments?
I'm okay with moving forward.
Okay, right. What I'm hearing is, especially during this COVID and all the virtual meetings, et cetera, that it presents an added difficulty to getting this started. Can I suggest that, and we are missing 2 members tonight to have their voices as well. Can I suggest that we basically defer the department liaisons until after the emergency is lifted, and we can, to plan for a committee of the whole at that point to bring this one back and flesh out exactly what we want for this program. Is that fair enough?
Good idea, yes.
Okay, so we have a number of recommendations. I'm sure that Debbie's been keeping track and keeping notes on all of those. Okay. So if I can do a very, very quick summary of my memory of this conversation anyway, under section 4, the electronic media, and we simply move forward with the updates to the procedural bylaw there. The agenda preparation, we will be adding the national anthem, and we will be adding the council initiatives to the agenda items. Right. For the open forum, we are in agreement that we'll move forward with this citizen engagement platform. Okay. And for section 25, we're in agreement that we'll move forward to electronic voting through that system. With the committee of the whole, we've agreed to have a regular schedule and a fully defined schedule, and that the chairing will be brought back with the 2 options when it comes back for the bylaw update. And then for the department liaison, right, we've agreed to defer that until after the emergency process is over and if we can discuss it again. So those are the recommendations. So Debbie, did I capture them appropriately?
Yes,
And
you did.
then I look for a motion to that effect. Nathan, thank you. Seconded by Carol. And call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And then item 4.4, a proposed draft policy related to complaints and bylaw enforcement. This is, further to our best practices for customer service and our strategic initiatives that way. Debbie, did you want to speak to it before council starts talking?
Sure, I guess it's just kind of a twofold in that when people talk about complaints or inquiries, and there's, it's a matter of whether, they've put something into the township. It's kind of a twofold system of one is based on, say, customer service or a complaint against a department or something, or against council. So there's that one avenue, and then the second avenue is on bylaw enforcement. So again, somebody, they say it's a complaint, but it may just be an inquiry. There's a lot of anonymous, and again, if we have to do any action on it, we need to have that backup so that they can help us enforce it if it goes to that. So if we don't see it or an officer's not there, we need to have the mechanism. So this is kind of two separate policies on two different avenues in regards to what the public think of as complaints or inquiries into the township.
Okay, thank you, council. And I think, no, you've had the document in front of you. That's just with that clarity. And does this meet our objectives? And one of the things that we've talked about before, or we certainly heard on the various social medias, et cetera, is I told the township this 6 years ago and they've never answered me, or comments like that. And I shouldn't be using those voices, but it is something that we hear. Right? And unfortunately, with little documentation, with little process around it, we really have no way to respond to those statements. Right? This will provide us with a process where things get recorded, they get followed up on, they get chased down, and answers get provided. Right? And hopefully that closes that loop. I think that is the intent for these processes. Right? Comments? Nathan.
Yeah, I agree with your sentiments, Your Worship. I mean, one thing it doesn't refer to in the policy, and I don't know how you would go about it. Of course, to your point, Your Worship, it's often us as members of council that often receive complaints, and I'm conscious that we want to work with this policy to ensure equity and fairness, and also to protect ourselves as well, so that we're not accused of being unfair or treating other people more favorably, etc. And so inevitably we're involved in this process at somewhere along the line, typically at the informal resolution stage. And that's a part of our job. It's not the job. It's not our responsibility to fix people's individual problems, but it is part of what we do. But I think it would be important, and perhaps there could be something put in there to identify, for the benefit of residents, to educate residents about what our jobs are and are not. That at the informal stage, if there isn't a resolution, then residents will be encouraged to go through an informal resolution process, and at that point, members of council step back. We've done what we were asked to do as far as, bringing an issue to the attention of staff, knowing as we do the right member of staff perhaps to put someone in touch with, etc. I just want to make sure that council protects themselves and works in a robust and equitable way with this strategy, because I think it's a very good strategy for the reasons that you articulated earlier, Your Worship.
Thank you. I tend to agree that that's an important part. I was viewing the Okay, if someone phones into the front desk at the township office and says, I want to complain about this. This is a fairly clear process that staff member can walk through with that individual to record the issue and get it started to be dealt with. I was kind of viewing our role in a similar way to what the person on the phone at the front desk would have, is we're receiving, we're guiding the person through inputting, and then it goes off to the appropriate places. But I think you're right in that it would be worthwhile to include a statement. It's hard for staff to include statements about the job. It is the job of a counselor. It is a job of a member of council to do this. That's a difficult position for a staff member to be in. But to a degree, we have to. Right? Ron, go ahead.
To your point earlier, I mean, as you know, we're all often approached by, complaints from residents. They're vague, they're not detailed, they don't remember who they talked to, and they go on, and then it probably either embellish it or, or whatnot. And that's, upon further investigation, you realize that, well, that wasn't the case, that we did contact them and blah, blah, blah. So it's not, but I think any clarification that we can add for not only staff and us, but even for the residents, it's all good. I mean, we can eliminate hopefully more of these conversations in Foodland or someplace or at the skating rink where, I phoned you so-and-so and they didn't get back to me, and I don't anything we can do to improve that, I'm all for. And I again, and not to point fingers at anyone, so a lot of it's miscommunication in life, not just in our township office, our staff, our residents. So anything we can do to clarify anything and have it in writing, back it up, whatever, it's all good. I support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm seeing general nods. Okay. Debbie, go ahead.
Yeah, so part of that, we do have our mechanism right now for service requests. So again, just so council's aware, if somebody does call in, if it's something that is, say, a bylaw complaint, we have a process through the system, our current system, to put it in that it does become confidential. So initial conversations, if it's an inquiry or something like that, it would be within the general program. Once it goes into that it's an enforcement or it's being looked at for enforcement, it goes over that it's totally confidential. So the township staff, only those who are privy to the information are able to see it. Again, that's to protect, because as much as we want to help individuals, there's also the privacy part of things. So I know we get a lot of pushback in regards to, well, I called and you're not, reporting back to me on what's happening. Unfortunately, we can't in some respects, because again, as much as there's the freedom of information, there's also the protection of privacy part of the act. So we have to be cautious on how we go about it as well, even internally. So one department may not know what the other department's doing, depending on what situation it is. But if there's a complaint that comes in that reaches more than one department, then we do include, who needs to be included in regards to it. So I guess just so that council is aware, there is a system already in now that service requests are being put in. Managers are able to watch, as they're going through, as they're getting closed, those types of things. So just so that.
And I can report to council that on a number of times I've had people approach me with, comments like they didn't get back to me or they didn't answer my question, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been able to go to staff through Steve and said, can you look up the requests from this individual or from this address or whatever that may be? And staff are quite able to, using that service work order process, go through and list in detail what the communications, what the response times, et cetera, are for that particular issue. I see this complaint process as adjunct to that. that it's a very, very similar process. It's just not, when someone complains that there's garbage spilled, a garbage pail's been dumped in the park, or a street light's out that's not working. Those are requests for service. When someone complains that I didn't like the attitude of that particular employee, well, that one's just a complaint. There's no service request involved in that. Right? They just want to tell us off. This way, we can put them into the record. They can be tracked. And I don't know if senior staff will use it as, that employee's had 17 complaints about them. I don't know. That's up to management to figure that side of it out. But anything that goes into a system of that nature, if we're called upon to, I'll say, answer to it, there's at least a record and we can track through. And I think that is very valuable to us and to the township as a whole. And it allows us to keep the metrics, keep the measurements of how we're doing in a much better way. So any other comments with regard to, I'll say first, the complaints process that has been identified? And that's a hand. Mike, go ahead.
That's a great idea. I mean, I've been drawn into it lately too, and you were working with me on the other, and Steve both did a fantastic job with the information coming back. So just the way to track it, I think it's great moving forward, and the fact that it can be transparent and referred back to for historical context would be great.
Thank you. Other comments on the complaint side? And I'll move over to the bylaw enforcement side. It is basically the same process. It just mentions the confidentialities of any enforcement activities, things of that nature. We as council, I have reported a number of things over the years to the clerk, this clerk or previous clerks, where things were reported to me. And my job at that point, as far as I'm concerned, is to walk away. That's what enforcement's for. And it's none of my business what happens after that. And I think this reinforces that. Any other comments on that? Seeing none. This one is for recommendation received for discussion for the draft complaint policy. So as the direction would be to move forward towards a policy, a formal policy. Deb, that's what you're looking for? Sorry, you can't tell that that's who I'm looking at.
Sorry, yes, the direction would be is if this is something that council is interested in. Again, these haven't been circulated to all of staff. We'd be doing that, but if this is just again samples. So what we'd be looking for is if this is something that council is interested in, or the committee, then we would bring something forward to council in a more formal process.
Thank you. And so that's the motion that I'm looking for. And I'll go with Mike for that one, seconded by Nathan. Thank you. I call a question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. And Lori is here, the Director for Community and Customer Services. The item that I added, 4.5, at the Deputy Mayor's request, it's a quick one. There is, Lori, maybe you can explain this better, but there is activity going on with regard to the further development of the Babcock Mill Park in conjunction with the Odessa Lions. And in further conversations with that, Jim has volunteered to be a liaison between. He's heavily engaged with the locals in the Lions Club, and obviously also with the township. So if I believe, Lori, is there going to be a formal committee struck?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. I'm not sure what you mean by a formal committee, Mr. Mayor.
I know that there is a request from Jim to be engaged with a staff and Lions committee or a conversation to help that process move forward.
Oh, okay.
And,
We have we have scheduled a meeting for July 8th at 11. So we have the design completed right now for the Babcock Mill pathway. And we have a meeting scheduled on July 8th at 11, and I sent that to you and to Jim. Would he like some more information? And I can provide him with the design because I have that now.
Debbie, maybe you can speak to what Jim was looking for.
Yeah, so the deputy mayor was asking that if he could be the council liaison for this project. So again, that he would be part of any conversations or anything like that, just to have a awareness of it.
Okay, so and he was asking for council's permission to be that council liaison. Does anybody on council have a comment? Either a wish to approve that or a wish to deny that? Do we need a motion for that, Debbie? No?
No, just I think if the committee is okay, then I think the idea would be that he would just be the liaison.
Then the committee of the whole provides a direction that the deputy mayor be voluntold as a liaison to the rec department and the Babcock Mill project. Fair enough? And Debbie says I don't need a motion for that effect, just information. And with that, is there anything else for the good of the committee? Nobody? Seeing nothing. Debbie hates it when I ask that question anyway. Then I look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Council Townend and Councillor Buderick. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned, folks. Thank you very much. Good conversation tonight. Thank you. Good night, all. I don't think I heard your voice at all, Steve.
Gonna end.
I did ask a question, but
Oh, that's right. Yes. Okay.